video. Today I'll be going over a build guide for my Rolling Slam Titan. This is a build that I pretty much came up with, but actually has a lot of similarities to the Stampede Titan. But there are some intricacies about this build that I wanted to make the Rolling Slam attack skill work, and there are some choices that I've made that are definitely suboptimal, but were just thematic for me. So one of those, going over here, is my stat tree. You may notice that I have no dexterity or intelligence spec'd in. We just had the base amount. Everything is put into strength, so it really is my Unga Bunga strength Titan build. We do have 4600 HP, which is a decent amount here. Definitely more than most people will have in the early game, and we still use mana, although I am contemplating switching that out. Basically, I don't really spec into any armor, since honestly it's not that useful of a stat. I have 64 block. I do use the Savalan shield, which does have lucky block. So with advantage on block, it comes out to be about 87% block chance. This is one of the biggest pieces since the last video I posted where I went over clearing ultimatum. I am actually using the exact same weapon from that video. However, I've done a lot of work to get enough strength in order to have Giant's Blood. So I'll be going over the skill tree in just a moment, but I do have pretty much capped out resistances, and I've also spent some stat points in getting life recovery, and so basically life regeneration is actually a pretty decent stat in some pieces of gear where a lot of people may not be wanting that. It's actually pretty helpful and does basically make it so you don't really have to hit flash too often, and in a fight that health regeneration is actually really coming into play, especially when you're only taking a couple small hits from time to time. It also lets you pretty much ignore burning ground. There's just a lot of benefits from using life regeneration, but you do have to be careful about specific maps or waystones that say you don't really get any health regeneration. Pretty much sets that to 0, so you don't want to really take those maps. So moving on, I'll be going over my skill tree. This is what I have currently spec'd. For the Ascendancy, it's very critical that you take Hulking Form. This is pretty much the best Ascendancy. Yes, it's a 2-point Ascendancy, but it's incredibly strong, and you get a backpack, which is really nice. I am taking more maximum life. This is really critical to getting enough health to survive. And then crushing blows here is pretty nice, and it lets you basically heavy stun a lot of basically small mobs really easily. There's a reason why you don't take this, is pretty much because I'm not speccing into armor. It's just not that apparent, like impactful, and even with the small amount I have, it seems like it's good enough for all the small hits. For Earthbreaker, there's currently a bug as of from release until today, January 7th, where Rolling Slam doesn't work with Aftershock. There is an Aftershock, and I personally tested this myself, but the Aftershock does no damage, so that's the reason why I'm not taking this, and that's also the reason why I'm not taking Split the Earth here for Aftershock chance. So for the skill tree, I'm pretty much taking Relentless here. The life regeneration per second is really nice, and getting 10 strength from that node is quite nice. Taking Defender's Resolve here. This is pretty much useless since I never actually active block, but it's for pretty much hitting the block chance I need, the 64 block chance. So for block, I am taking Unstoppable Barrier as well as Hunkered Down, taking all the nodes for block chance there. And I believe I have 2 points right here in shield block, but I have not taken this one since it's not really necessary, as I've hit the maximum block I need. You can probably replace these 2 nodes if you get basically red jewels with block chance, so you can skip 2 more of these. I used to have more spec'd into jewel sockets for this one and this one, but I'm recently trying removing those in favor of getting these bleed nodes, so I'll go over that in about a second. But For Rolling Slam support, you want to get Devastation here. The AoE is really nice, makes clearing easy. You want to take this anchor tree right here. It's just really good. Basically gives you way more damage. I have 1 point here in attack damage area. This is kind of just a point I haven't really used. I might remove this in favor of Vigilance and changing out the jewels to not have the block chance, since I have 2 of those there with block chance. The alternative for that is basically just getting more melee damage. So here's an example. You'll basically get melee damage and increased damage with maces, or attack damage, or increased maximum fire resistance. So something like this is also a viable option. So for the rest of the tree, we're taking a lot of points here. Here's some survivability points, damage points. This reduces your attack speed but gives you a lot of damage. Skull Crusher is insanely good and pretty much necessary here. For Rolling Slam, I am still using the Armor Explosion Devastate tech. That was basically nerfed when they removed recursive armor explosion. I think it's still pretty good. And so having stunning them and then having the armor explosion does increase a lot of damage. It's also worth noting this is more damage, so it's multiplicative instead of all of the additive damage. So this one's really important. Going up the tree here, I have both of these large nodes. This one basically increases area effects, and this one increases damage. I tried removing this one, but I actually noticed this was doing a lot of damage. So this one is going to stay for me for the foreseeable future. So some new stuff that I've added that I've only just started testing is taking these bleed affliction nodes, as well as taking this one here. Basically the idea for this one is to get enough bleed chance to work with Hammer the Gods with Lacerate. So we can see here that with taking the nodes and Lacerate, it gets the bleed chance to 102, so it'll always bleed. And then I'm also taking deep cuts there to increase the magnitude of the bleed. Just going against another boss recently, it still takes about 2 Hammer the Gods to kill the boss. So for me, it is not one-shotting them. This is something I want to optimize because bossing is really tough. Especially facing bosses with Temporal Bubble is something I've died a lot to. So currently I'm level 94, and one of my most recent deaths is just dying to bosses with Temporal Bubble because it's so punishing if you're slow, and you want to spend like as little time there as possible, since they'll pretty much catch you on the mistakes. So that's pretty much my passive tree here. Here's it zoomed out. So like I said, this is experimental, and the bleed stuff here is experimental, especially these as well. So these also are experimental. These are empowered or buff for empowered abilities. So the idea is when you are stunning a boss, causing armor break, then you pretty much do Seismic Cry as well as Infernal Cry, which empowers your next attack. Therefore, the empowered attacks here will be doing additional damage as well as aggravate bleeding. So, we're potentially aggravating the bleeding, so it could add a lot more damage there. Other notable points is Resolute Technique. So, there's really no point in critting. Critting is like a 5% chance on the mace, and not having to deal with any evasion on the small mobs is just great. So this is 100% required. Some other ones here is Titanic is really good. You're going to need that, especially the 5% increased strength is really significant. And then getting the elemental resists here is, I think, pretty self-explanatory. And then I have tried Armor Break as well as Pile On, but you do kind of have to waste 2 points here, especially if you do use the Devastate tech. So it didn't really feel too good to take 3 points for 60% increased damage when I could be taking that pretty much like from other 2 points. And then here, Giant's Blood is core if you want to run a shield as well as a two-handed mace. So in my previous video, I did not use a shield, but going back on it now, pretty much having a shield doubles or triples your survivability. So I highly recommend it. It does make you slower. Not really as cool in my opinion. I want to use just the mace, but I found myself dying way too much to projectiles, especially during Breach, where Breach was pretty much unsurvivable if you get stuck, because they'll just keep shooting you and stunning you, even with your high stun threshold. Going over the skills once more. So I've talked about Rolling Slam, Hammer of the Gods. Leap Slam is just kind of nice, low mobility there, get you around. I also do use Shield Charge just to move around as well. It doesn't really do much besides just some mobility. Shockwave Totem is really for just kind of keeping stun thresholds on bosses, especially if they're doing some kind of like charge ability around them and you can't hit them. This prevents their stun threshold from restarting. And for the two spirit passives, I have Herald of Ash. This one's core, and also Overwhelming Persistence. I just remember I forgot to go back, but I want to go over the gems in each. So Rolling Slam, these two are core, and then pretty much I have Fire Infusion here just to add a little bit of extra damage on the Rolling Slam, as well as Magnified Effect. This is kind of, and as well as Martial Tempo. These two are kind of quality of life. They're not really necessary. This one kind of decreases your attack time, and this makes it so it's easier just to clear large amounts of mobs. So you can see it's at 2.13. It's not 25% faster by any means. It's like 5. So you may have noticed that a lot of people also take Blood Rush as well as the skill speed. They're really nice to have. I mean, I like them, but at the end of the day, I believe with Rolling Slam, it takes it from 2.13 to 2.04. So we're talking about like a tenth of a second, which is, yes, noticeable, but it's a lot of points for something that's supposed to be a lot more significant. So I opted out to put those points into getting some bleed damage. Hammer of the Gods is also core. For both of these, I've used Perfect Jewelers. I just added these two for bleed support. Getting maximum damage is important here because bleed scales off your maximum damage. This one also adds more physical damage, and the last one, Ancestral, boosts it for another 20%. So it's pretty self-explanatory, I think. Just basically add as much damage as I can, and just 2 bleed support gems. For Leap Slam, Consecrated Ground is probably the most core one. That way, when you land, you are in a healing field. As you can see, the healing is really significant. It pretty much doubles my life regen from 200 to about 400 something. So that is really important. The rest are kind of whatever. This one triggers a shockwave, which nicely scales off my strength. So it actually is pretty good here. And then we have just some random other gems here to ignite enemies. So this can be used to kind of like kill off small mobs that are really weak. It does a little bit less than the first hit of Rolling Slam, minus the armor explosion. So if they're like really trash mobs, it sometimes can kill them and just kind of makes clearing a little bit faster. Going over some of the other ones, Herald of Ash, just kind of some survivability gems. So here, regenerate life, as well as this one's really important because when you clear a large mob, this will full heal you, and then this one I don't think really does anything, so I'm not even really sure if that increases the burn or not. Infernal Cry, this one's important as it'll buff the skill to do more damage, and then I don't actually have any rage support right now, so this doesn't do anything, and this doesn't really do anything. It does 1 stack of Corrupting Blood, but it's kind of negligible. And then the totem is also pretty negligible since that one's just kind of there. So that's pretty much the build itself. I will be going over the gear now. So basically, for your mace, you probably just want the highest physical DPS possible. This one, I believe, is 900 physical DPS per second. It starts getting pretty expensive around that threshold. I believe this one was about 15 divine when I bought it, and I've spent another 15 divine just trying to re-roll this elemental damage with attacks into more physical damage with the whittling omen, but I haven't hit it yet, so I'm just kind of leaving it as it is. But that would be a really nice buff to this weapon. For most people, you probably want reduced attribute requirements. You can see that this attribute requirement is 212, so you need 236 strength in order to equip it. I'm pretty much barely there at 260 or 640, I mean, so you need 636 strength. I'm not sure if I misspoke there, but you want reduced attribute requirements for almost any build until you work up enough strength to run this. So I pretty much have strength on almost every piece of gear, maybe except for this helmet. So this helmet is pretty much just covers my resistance base, and when looking at gear, basically resistance is life is really important. I'm in the process of attempting to phase out using mana with blood magic, so with that I should be able to remove mana from all my skills, or sorry, not skills, my gear. So you can see that I do have a decent amount of mana here, and my mana pool is 678, which is just enough to use the skill combo here. So to double buff as well as do a slam, I have leech physical damage as mana. So once the hammer lands, it full restores my mana bar, but you can always just pop a potion. I never have any mana issues anyways, but it's another stat that I can get on my gear if I remove that. For my anointment, I do have acceleration for skill speed and movement speed. I mean, Titan's just so slow. Getting another 3% here is really nice. I mean, with everything, I'm only at plus 27. So, because we lose, I believe, 5 and then another 5 off the shield. So, from the armor and shield. So, the helmet and armor pieces, really, you just want to get as much resistance as possible. Excuse me, I'm a little sick. As well as strength. So strength is really important. You want lots of life and lots of strength. I recommend getting the expert steel plate with the I believe implicit that gives you life regeneration per second. This can roll from
tempered by flame
1.5 to 2.5. It's a pretty big difference in terms of how much regeneration you have. So I believe you can see here, if I take this off, it goes down to 63. So this one by itself is providing a lot of health regen, so something like 100 plus. It is 2.5% of my health, so yeah, quick math, I mean 5 10, I mean it's like 150, something like that. Moving on, I have basically lots of strength, as much life as possible, and some chaos resist here. I recommend getting the amber amulet. This will help you get a lot of strength, and you want a nice roll of strength on the amber amulet. For the rings, strength and resists life. It's kind of the name of the game here as well. Physical attack damage to attacks is okay. It's actually pretty bad here because of the low attack rate, but you can see this one's really nice just because of the amount of strength it's providing. For gloves or your weapons, if you're not running blood magic, you're going to want one source of leech physical attack damage as mana, so that one's really key to either have that on your gloves or weapon. You can run attack speed on your gloves as well for quality of life, but just know that it's really just quality of life. It's at the end of the day, it's not going to make or break the build. For most of the sockets, I'm using maximum HP, so if possible, you should try to get as much as your resistance is covered by the gear itself, and then socket in maximum HP, because it's really hard to get maximum HP, as the only one that it can be found on is the amulet, and it's a really low odds. And I've been looking for days for even just like having strength, life, as well as percent maximum life on an amulet. It's there aren't really many out there, and I believe if one came out, it would be like 50 to 100 divine, because that roll itself is weighted so low compared to the other stats. For boots, you just want 35% movement speed. If they ever, let you change out the soul cores or gems, I mean, I would switch this to maximum HP, but this was made a while back, so I'm just gonna be overcapped on chaos. But this is a really nice piece. And then for your belt, it's really hard to beat ingenuity. If you don't have ingenuity, because it's too expensive, you just want to hit your basically your resistances on it as much as possible. I believe they can roll strength and health, so getting as many of those stats is really good. Sun threshold, not crazy good, but life regeneration is nothing to scoff at. But with life regeneration, you need to get enough of it to matter. If you get like 50 life regeneration, you're not really going to notice it, but once you hit kind of like the 150 to 200 threshold, it starts becoming a lot more noticeable, especially if you do get the armor piece here with a high enough, like at least 2 out of the 2.5 life per second. That's going to really just make you feel a lot more tankier. And I can't stress enough, if you feel like you're dying to projectiles, having a shield is night and day. But there is a lot of gear requirements in order to hit this, as well as getting enough strength. So with the way I've built my character, with only strength, like, I feel like it's really feasible here. And if you get a weapon with reduced attributes, you can probably hit 400. Maybe about 450 would be where the requirements would be. So with that being the build, I'm going to go over, I guess, some waystones that I can run, as well as just, run through a map to kind of show how the build works. So the waystones that work are ones like this one, where they have 1 damage mod and not 2. So if they have increased monster damage, as well as like they do additional lightning damage, you could get bursted down so fast you don't have time to react. So having 1 damage is usually fine. Monsters being armored, if you're running the Devastate tech, it doesn't matter too much, and you don't really care too much about elemental resistances. Some easy ones are like this one, where they're evasive, armored, and they can steal your, like power charges, but we don't have any. So this one's really easy. This is also another example of one that is very pretty straightforward. Burning Ground, if you have health regeneration, completely like negates that, so that one's really easy. This one also pretty easy as well. Yes, they are faster, so if you're not really tanky, this can be kind of tough, but the other 2 are pretty much free. So having 1 kind of dangerous-ish mod is usually like kind of like where I'm like, this is pretty easy. Having 2 makes it quite difficult, and 3 is just death. 2 damage mods I don't even really want to consider, because I'm pretty likely to die. So here are some examples of ones that are kind of death. 2 damage mods on this one, monster damage and extra chaos damage, is really lethal here. And then if they ever show penetrates elemental resists, that will kill you instantly, so you cannot run those. So those are 2 examples of ones that I would never run on this build. You probably want to run a ranged character for penetrating elemental resistances. So one thing that I want to cover is going to be the Atlas tree. I forgot to mention that. So with the Atlas tree, you want to spec as much into Breach as possible for looting purposes. This is what I have for Breach. For everything else, I pretty much just try to juice the prefix modifiers as well as explicit modifiers as much as possible to get Waystone drops, but ultimately I want to get quantity and item rarity as high as possible for the best possible chances to get divines. So that's kind of the reasoning behind this. And then increasing rares is always really nice, and making them have more modifiers just means the loot that they'll drop is better. I've put some points into ritual, so I've gotten 2 omens and beat the boss. But after I've gotten these points, I've not seen another audience with the king. So I actually saw all of them before getting these points. So I don't know what's up. I've done a bunch of ritual, but the odds are low. So do ritual with a grain of salt. Here is what I have for the bossing maps. Atlas. I don't have the last 2. I'm not sure which one I'm missing. So I need to go find out or try each one since I don't remember which one. I've definitely done 16 with corruption and irradiated, so I'm not really sure which one I'm missing at this point. The middle ones here are all equally useless, so I mean Essence just means one more rare, so that's the one I would go. And then I'd probably just get corruption here since XP is pretty negligible at this point at level 94 unless you're really pushing for more. If you are pushing, make sure you get the Omen of Amelioration. I use this all the time. It does cost a lot of money, but saves you a ridiculous amount of time from 92 to 94. And I would start turning that on maybe when I reach like 40% if I'm actually thinking about leveling up. At the moment, I'm trying out new stuff, and I'm okay with dying for now, so that's why I haven't unactivated. But alright, so here's the map I'm going to run, which is going to be Rust Ball with Ritual and Irradiated. I'm going to choose one that is going to be pretty straightforward here. I'm going to pick one that is a little bit more dangerous to kind of just show you an example of the bulkiness of this build. So I'm going to choose one with Burning Ground to show that you can kind of ignore it, as well as increased monster damage to show you at least 1 damage mod added on, and kind of like you'll see why 2 is kind of unreasonable. So with Burning Ground, you can see that your HP does drop, but with regen it kind of is negligible, and if you kind of consecrated ground in it, you actually don't take damage. So you can see that my health doesn't drop at all. So here's an example of how the build works. So kind of just rolling slam into everything, and the idea is you just want to keep moving forward. The clear isn't complete, so you'll notice that there's a lot of monsters that won't die in your clear, and you just ignore them. Like going back for every little monster is way too much work. So I will say that this build is bad for if you want to do any like leveling, or you want the most XP possible, because you'll find that you're just not able to kill everything very effectively. So here's a rare. You can kind of just throw Hammer of the Gods on them, run around. You can hit them or not because it will kill them. You can see that this ritual, it's fine. It's a little bit annoying with the tornadoes because it will shred the armor completely off. It's pretty much impossible to not lose all your armor, even if you have a lot. It is annoying, but you just have to be a little more careful, as you'll take a lot more physical damage without having any armor. Just clearing the surrounding area here. I'm going to run back and do this. So I do leave the totem there. You can kind of walk around the tornado, but you can see that it pretty much just breaks all your armor instantly, so it's pretty hard to avoid. Molten shields do a little bit of damage. It's not like the worst thing in the world. You can actually ignore a lot of the effects that monsters are doing, as long as they're not stacked on top of each other. So like for example, a single chaos orb from like a blooming flower or whatever they're called isn't going to do a lot, but if there's like 3 or 4, then you got to be careful. So with overall projectiles, they don't really do too much because you're blocking 87% of them with Savalin, which makes it so that normal hits don't really do too much too. Since I only take about 13% of those hits, the only time where I'm really taking damage is from AoEs. Okay, this is a little bit dangerous here, considering I have no armor, so I just have to be careful considering the zone is so small. so tornado actually hurts a bit. Just need to make sure I flask. So this one's a little bit annoying for sure. So that's not really relevant. And then just gonna re-roll this. So looks like we got nothing. And I was actually accidentally sitting in the burning fire there. So on another build, I probably would have died because I wasn't even aware that I was standing in it. And I only lost like a third of my health. But the overall clear and coverage of this build is a little lacking, but I enjoy just being able to kind of move forward. Just I got a trade. Unfortunately, I have to ignore that. It's like I am named. It's annoying. Take this. So yeah, essences are also really easy. You just drop Hammer of the Gods, clears it pretty much instantly. Start this one while I still have the shrine. Just kind of run around here. This one's a little bit easier to dodge the tornado. Kind of just ring around the Rosie. But rituals really aren't bad at all, and are one of my favorite content to do. I find that ranged characters aren't really able to do effectively, unless like your Stormweaver, I guess, because you just kill everything. To be honest, I'm not sure why I even did that, since I know that there's nothing good in rituals, so I kind of did that without thinking. So, yep, pretty much just keep moving forward here. For the boss, there's really no other setup here except for you just basically need to stun break the boss. I actually didn't think I'd stun break him so easily there, so I accidentally wasted my Infernal Cry out the gate. But you can see bosses do hurt, but they're unlikely to one-shot you. Besides, usually they have one move that's really dangerous. So here, go for Hammer of the Gods here. So this is the dangerous move from this guy. So he does hurt. So not having enough bulkiness will definitely hurt. You can see I did get chunked quite badly there. But for me, as long as I don't get one shot, I can survive a lot of things. So I would say the bleeding really does increase a lot of damage for bosses, and you kind of just want to kill bosses fast enough that there aren't like too many openings that you die to. But that's why I'd say life is really heavily prioritized, and strength will give you life, so that's very good. So with my 600 strength, that's giving me 1200 life, which is quite excellent. So I would say having 4000 is like a good break point to strive for if you're doing all strength. Let's find this last rare enemy. So map traversal also not very fast, you know, like 27 movement speed, but you don't have to like ever really move back for enemies unless there's a lot of on death effects on the ground. So that's what I like about this build. And I'm going the wrong way. Looks like it's on the other side of this wall too. But yeah, rares. Oh, he stunned me. So be careful of those circles. Taking hit by one, not the biggest deal. Getting hit by like 5 or 6 of them stacked up will probably kill you. Especially, I've noticed like there's a lot of like lightning ones. But that's the clear. Let me know if you guys have any other questions. And thanks for watching.